Breathtakingly beautiful, but hostile to all life, this is the far north of Szpicbergen. Walruses are used to this freezing cold. They romp around in the shallow waters off the coast of Szpicbergen, a rare opportunity to accompany these dangerous seals on their dives. The Norwegian Szpicbergen archipelago, also called Svalbard. It's located only 1,000 kilometers away from the North Pole. Jason Roberts is at home here in this rugged terrain. He's a biologist, photographer and survival expert, and always on the search for something unusual. Seeing the glaciers carve still gives him goosebumps. The birth of an iceberg is definitely one of the most spectacular natural events in Svalbard. Dangerous tidal waves often develop once the massive pieces of ice plummet into the ocean. It's important to always be careful. Large areas of the islands are covered with rutted glacier fields and large ice sheets. Polar bears can appear everywhere on the islands of Svalbard. They've been strictly protected since 1973, and as a result, the population has been able to recover greatly. Jason Roberts has left Ny-Ålesund, one of the last bastions of civilization. He's now on his way to the Prince Karl's Islands. The islands are uninhabited and a refuge for large seals. Our welcoming committee, a walrus mother with baby. Walruses are the heavyweights amongst the seals. These imposing animals can weigh up to 1.5 metric tons. Most of their weight consists of fat immediately beneath their tough skin. Without their fat, walruses could not survive in the frigid temperatures of the Arctic waters. Even their offspring are already well protected against the cold. After 4 hours, Jason has reached the Prince Karl's Islands safe and sound. The boat trip can be rough at times. And it was worth it. His friends and study subjects are all here and welcoming him. Some of them check to make sure that he is the same person as the one who came last year. Others can't be bothered and continue to sleep and snore loudly. Walruses are very social animals. Scientists always describe their life together in a group as exemplary. Nevertheless, their social structure is subject to a strict hierarchy. Jason could stop his boat here, but he won't because it could spook some of the animals and cause a mass stampede back into the water. It would be a quick end for Jason's day, so instead he lets them sleep. Their massive tusks are the most obvious feature of the walruses. They couldn't survive without them. The tusks are tools for climbing, searching for food, and for stabilizing the walruses on the ice. And of course, they're also essential weapons against their worst enemy, the polar bear. Observing a group of walruses all day long can be quite amusing, and encouraged our camera team to shoot a lot more footage than needed. Walruses are masters of constant scratching and rolling around because countless parasites seek out the many folds in their thick skin. Jason has found a good place to anchor. What happens next is very rare. several curious walrus females come closer together with their young to check out the biologist and the camera team. Maybe the animals recognize Jason, but they still seem unsure and keep their distance. Experts agree that walruses are quite dangerous in the water.
Big male, the one at the back.
Therefore, Jason is cautious and waits. This is something even Jason has never seen before, walruses kissing each other. And although walrus mothers are considered very dangerous, they seem to know that Jason is only a lightweight and won't cause any trouble for their offspring. Most scientists would probably consider Jason to be crazy. Walruses are extremely agile in the water and can quickly reach speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour. Jason could never get away quick enough, especially not in his cumbersome survival suit. At this point, the survival expert has thrown all caution overboard. He's dangerously close to the animals. It almost seems as if the walruses expect to receive something from him, but he won't be able to offer food because he would have to dive down to the freezing cold ocean floor to get it for them. Who knows what really goes on in their unwieldy heads? It's not their trustfulness, but their clumsiness on land that has nearly caused the walrus to be extinct. For centuries, whalers butchered these animals to extract their oil and cut off their ivory tusks. Thanks to strict protection efforts, the Atlantic population nowadays numbers around 20 to 50,000 of these ocean mammals again. Experts have speculated about the walrus's diving habits for many years. Now we know that they will dive up to 100 meters for about 25 minutes in search of food. Physiologically, they're very well equipped for these dives, because walruses can greatly reduce their heartbeat and cut off the oxygen supply to much of their body tissue, except for the brain and the heart. This locomotive rushing towards our cameraman is driving his blood pressure to unknown heights. Fat floats. The big uns show how agile they really are. On land, it's much more difficult to scratch one's backside. Sometimes a second or even third walrus has to help. Despite all the comforts of the water, walruses are always drawn back to the land. Walruses have to sleep between their dives in order to conserve energy. They like to sleep close together to keep each other warm. These latecomers have missed out on a good sleeping spot within the group. They're so tired, though, that they just fall asleep right then and there. A dominant bull is not happy with his sleeping arrangements. He tries to find something more comfortable, at any cost. It's not like the other walruses could stop this huffing steamroller. Thankfully, it all ends without conflict. One of the latecomers, a female, finally reaches the group. She patiently waits and won't use brute force to push other group members out of the way. It's hard to take our eyes off him. Weight watchers will be delighted to get their hands on this bull, but he is sure of his beauty and does not care about his weight. In fact, the walrus ladies are quite taken with him, especially once he starts shaking his masses. Jason sets out to explore part of the island. He'll stay here for 3 weeks, completely secluded and away from all civilization, to continue his studies for the Polar Institute in Szpicbergen. He always carries a weapon beneath his jacket, because polar bears could show up at any time. He won't shoot the animals, but he can warn them by shooting into the sky. His shelter for the night is this tiny shack, which has already held up through many storms. As soon as Jason is inside his shack, the king of the Arctic pays him a visit. His little abode has several advantages for Jason. He takes pictures of the walrus from a position that goes unnoticed to the animals, and therefore offers ideal conditions for Jason's behavioral studies. Also, the shack offers sufficient protection against the bitter cold. All of a sudden, the group starts to move. Have they spotted or heard a polar bear? Walruses have incredible hearing. The Inuit, who used to hunt walruses, would imitate their calls and receive answers from up to 1.6 kilometers away, as proved by scientists from the university in Anchorage, Alaska. The eyesight of walruses, on the other hand, is quite bad, and it's assumed that they are very near-sighted. They also don't really need long-distance vision, since their food is directly in front of them on the ocean floor. The only need for long sight would be to see a polar bear coming. Jason goes on a search for the white predator. Over the years, he's learned a lot about polar bears and has developed a sixth sense when it comes to these majestic creatures. Unfortunately, the kingdom of the polar bears is in grave danger of disappearing. Global warming is taking its toll, and through increased temperatures, all the magnificent glaciers are melting away at alarming speeds. The Arctic, as we know it, seems to be on the brink of demise. Without ice, there won't be any polar bears. The predators need the massive pack ice sheets in order to hunt seals out on the ocean. Here they have already started to change their game and are now hunting from land, namely walruses. The polar bear's success rates can be seen everywhere on the islands. Jason has put this walrus skeleton back together. He makes notes on these skeletons for his statistics, and they will show him how many more walruses the polar bears have killed since his last visit. For now, it seems that the polar bears are not endangering the walrus population to any extent. The group has calmed down again and lets Jason come closer. It's almost as though the walruses know that we don't pose any danger to them. They continue to skillfully work on removing their skin parasites, one of their more harmless ailments. Shocking, on the other hand, is the high mortality rate in calves. Only 20% of them survive. Polar bears are one of the causes, but also an increase in algae due to higher ocean temperatures. Healthy walruses can live up to 30 years. Jason Roberts knows these problems. It's important for the biologist to educate the public with his statistics and shine a light on the issues regarding the walrus so that they can be sufficiently protected. The 20 to 50,000 walruses in the Atlantic population are not enough to ensure their survival in the long run. The walrus populations of the Pacific are much better off. They've been protected since 1975 and number about 250,000 animals. But back to our friendly Atlantic back scratchers. It seems that grooming, which mostly consists of scratching, takes up most of their time, except for sleeping, of course. The calves, as well as the adults, suffer from a number of external and internal parasites. Therefore, a strong poisonous algae bloom could kill this entire group. Jason has dared to take another step forward. He's able to watch the adolescent females safely bedded within the group, and happy as could be. Do they enjoy him being there, or are they only tolerating him? Jason knows that he has reached an unsafe distance. At eye level with the walrus, this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for any photographer. Will they come to him now? And there it is. Success. Their strong social structure within the group has almost led to their extinction. Seal hunters brutally beat one of the young walruses to attract the older animal's attention. Then they hobble right into a trap and are all killed. Jason knows about this brutality, but what's worse, there are still seal hunters out there who illegally hunt with these same tactics. Exhausted from the dive, this female crawls up onto the beach. It's hard to understand how anybody could be so brutal as to viciously slaughter an animal that looks like this. We've been here on the Prince Karl's Island with Jason for 4 days now. Our hope is to film the walruses underwater during their search for food. But then, a big surprise. Suddenly, and for no apparent reason, the walruses rush into the ocean. Jason assures us later that they were not escaping from us. Seeing this behavior reminds us of something that recently happened in Cape Pierce, Alaska, and which is still a total mystery to biologists. 60 walruses jumped off a cliff to their death. This was the third mass suicide of an entire group of walruses within the last 3 years. What was the reason for this extraordinary behavior? Biologists assume that a very high moon during the fall of that year prompted the animals to go on their deadly migration. Here on our island, everything has gone back to normal, and this peaceful bath time will finally lead to the footage that we have been dreaming about since our arrival here, to film the walruses underwater. Filming these animals in the ocean is quite a challenge. It's considered to be one of the most difficult and dangerous undertakings. Walruses are not at all friendly underwater and can get very aggressive. These pictures are the ultimate highlights of underwater filming. Cameraman Göran Elmer is able to document the incredible feeding behavior of walruses underwater. The Swedish underwater professional is even able to show how a walrus male shortly approaches a female. Needless to say that these large animals mate in the water. With their body masses, mating on land would be an impossible undertaking. But this bull does not have any luck with this lady today. He will have to continue to look for other beautiful walrus daughters. And there are many of them around. There are 20 females for one male. The females reach sexual maturity at the age of 5 to 6 years old, the males not until they are 10. And since a male does not become interesting for a female until he reaches a certain weight and position in the group's hierarchy, most bulls won't have a chance with the ladies until they're around 15 years old. Unfortunately, this bull is not able to disseminate his genes today. We're leaving the walrus population here in Szpicbergen and head further north towards the Arctic. We are leaving Svalbard for another archipelago, Franz Josef Land, an island group right around the polar circle. We are accompanied by French and Russian biologists. These islands were only discovered in 1872, and Franz Josef Land is Russian territory. Only scientists are allowed access here. Just like Svalbard, Franz Josef Land is also part of the European continental shelf, covered by glaciers and surrounded by masses of ice. Climatologists and glacial scientists here are also observing the slow demise of the ice crust. Icebergs developed through an ice fall of a large chunk off the glacier. Underwater, these icebergs develop their own bizarre world as they drift on the currents. The icebergs off Franz Josef Land only reach a medium size because the glaciers on the islands are very confined. Here, walruses are at home on the ice, unlike the population we visited in Szpicbergen. Open ice fields are few and far between in Franz Josef Land, and only open during a few months in the summer. The large ice floes offer great protection to the walrus from their fiercest predator, the polar bear. In the water, and especially inside these tight ice channels, a polar bear would not have much luck hunting for walruses. It's a master of not getting its feet wet, on the other hand. And the Russian biologists are masters of improvisation. This place can't be compared to the usual conveniences of Western polar research. We've been traveling for 3 days in order to get to our camp. The sight of a crashed transport jet does not give us much confidence and motivation. In addition, we've been on a long flight from Murmansk through the Barents Sea to Novaya Zemlya and then on to Franz Josef Land. The deterioration of this polar station is all too obvious. There's no money here to keep all this up and running. Science in this camp also means mastering the high art of improvisation. Therefore, the Russian researchers are more than delighted that the French team has brought a modern Zodiac, an irreplaceable tool in this environment. Before we're able to start working, we need to create a functioning infrastructure. Initial talks among the scientists. There are several fields of research: walruses, polar bears, and Arctic krill. There'll be enough food, though maybe not quite up to par for the French palates. Water for drinking and showers is outside, and there's a hole-in-the-ground latrine inside a small shack next to the main building. A generator provides electricity for running the microscopes and recharging camera batteries, one of the most important assets of the infrastructure here. This is Bolshoi, a mixed breed and also one of a kind. The scientists rely heavily on him, also for chasing away polar bears. Bolshoi is well known amongst the walruses here. Now that they've spotted him along the shore, it means trouble. He just can't help himself and quite enjoys antagonizing the walruses. Both sides then start a verbal shouting match that can be heard for miles. This interaction always ends the same way. Bolshoi moves away, making a noisy spectacle, and the walruses disappear back into the ocean. Afterwards, it's time to rest on top of an ice floe. This walrus demonstrates how to get up there. The tusks are an important survival tool for the walrus. The expedition leader is Professor Vladimir Averinchev, one of the leading walrus experts in the world. Averinchev is also an accomplished diver who wants to show us the fascinating and dangerous underwater world off Franz Josef Land. We take the opportunity and start to look for one of the rarest ocean inhabitants of the Northern Hemisphere, the Greenland shark. Here along the coast, where icebergs often run aground, is also supposed to be a hunting ground of these mysterious sharks. Icebergs etch deep trenches into the ocean floor, while they float through the water and make contact with the ground. Thanks to the natural and political inaccessibility of this archipelago, Greenland whales have found a refuge here. The majestic skeleton of one of these whales is stretched out on the ocean floor like a reef. The neck of the giant whale. The colossal bones only decay slowly and offer a large variety of species a habitat to live and hide in. The baleen plates are still attached to the jawbone. This massive filtration system, that was once the deadly fate of millions of small life forms and fed its owner for many years, has now served its time. The grave of the whale is in fact a home range for one of the Greenland sharks. Unfortunately, we only catch a glimpse before it disappears back into the deep, but we are in the right spot. Diving between floating icebergs is incredibly dangerous, and we are unable to forget that during our dive. In addition, the water temperature is only -2 degrees centigrade, and our regulators could freeze shut at any moment and cut off our air supply. The first surprise: tiny, obscure-looking creatures bustle around on the ice. They're obviously searching for food. On closer inspection, they turn out to be ghost shrimp. These clever highwaymen hold on to algae, sea urchins or rocks to feed on plankton that's floating by. In order to blend in, they take on the color of the surface they're sitting on. But in this case, they obviously don't have the color spectrum of the ice in their repertoire. Should their prey be too heavy, they lose their balance very easily. Right next to them, countless polyps stretch out their tentacles to catch something out of the stream of plankton. Free-swimming medusas will develop soon from these fixed organisms. A colorful sea cucumber. It relentlessly sucks off food particles that get stuck in its tentacles. These animals have nothing in common with the sausage-like creatures that we know from other oceans. They climb up onto exposed structures to gain better access to plankton floating by. And some even use them as cover for their forays. A dead spider crab. Hungry family members are the first ones there to irreverently make use of the leftovers. But there are others that are also interested, so they dispose of the tasty corpse as quickly as possible. Sea cucumbers and spider crabs are numerous here. It's proof of a nutrient-rich environment. These rocks are full of algae that can be eaten. A spider crab with tenants. This hostess has to carry around a whole village of barnacles. So the barnacles get around and can feed on plankton wherever the spider crab takes them. This is very curious. A sea urchin protects itself with additional seashells. Soon we find out why. A wolf eel couple is on the hunt for sea urchins. These fish have jaws like eccentric presses. Well-worn teeth are replaced. We only have a few minutes left before we have to ascend again. As always, the best is kept for the last. Behind the whale skeleton, we make out the contours of a fish in the dark. There's no doubt, this is a Greenland shark. We're unable to follow him into the deep at this point because we're limited by dive time and the cold. Until 1985, almost nothing was known about this shark. Then the American Nick Kaloyanis launched an expedition in order to find the mysterious animal and learn more about it. With their state-of-the-art equipment at the time, brave scientists dove underneath the dense pack ice in order to document the life of this shark species. Until then, most studies have been conducted with Greenland sharks that had been caught, most of them dead. The world below the ice is not only cold, but also very dark. For divers then and now, it's a challenging underwater environment that only a few can handle. The search for this mysterious phantom of the Arctic can be compared to the proverbial search for the needle in a haystack. At first, the only larger animal that Nick Kaloyanis was able to get in front of his cameras was a seal. But then he was able to shoot the very first underwater sequence with a Greenland shark that moved unusually sluggishly. His expedition brought to light a predator that has nothing in common with its fast and sleek relatives in more temperate waters. It's not particularly attractive and pretty lame. This was the first impression people had of this living specimen of a Greenland shark. This seal, on the other hand, is the epitome of agility in this region, but it has to watch out for these sharks. After many more years of research, we now know that the Greenland shark is not a sluggish, dumb scavenger, as was first believed, but quite an efficient hunter. Entire seals and parts of polar bears have been found in the shark's stomachs. When Nick Kaloyanis and his colleagues started their first expedition in the 1980s, they had no way of knowing what this alleged sleepy and lazy predator was really capable of. This error in judgment even manifested itself in the scientific genus name of this fish, Somniosus microcephalus, small-headed sleeper. The shark's head may be small compared to the rest of its body, but there's nothing sleepy about this fish. One should rather call him a persistent predator that will lurk in front of a seal breathing hole for weeks in order to strike at just the right moment. This animal does not have sleep in its eyes, but a parasite. Its supposed sluggishness is just a ploy to trick its prey. Nick Kaloyanis and his team nevertheless deserve all credit for giving new life to Greenland shark research, and a new image to this former myth of the Polar Sea. Nowadays, it's well known that the sharks can grow up to 7.5 meters, weigh 2,500 kilograms, and can dive extremely deep. But researching the small-headed sleeper is arduous work, and therefore many questions are still unanswered. For example, due to the very slow growth of these sharks, many scientists believe that they can live to be 200 years old. Obviously, nobody has been able to observe that, and we will probably have to wait quite a while to have it confirmed. This one now disappears right in front of us, back into icy cold and dark depths. Closer to the surface in the light, we find dense schools of small crustaceans. These are Arctic krill, a world of beauty never before seen. Now that it's the middle of summer, photosynthesis is at its height. Northern right whales profit from that. We're in luck because this whale species is almost extinct. It's believed that there are only 320 of these animals left in the world. And a little below the whales, at about 30 meters, our cameraman is able to film what very few have ever seen before: a walrus feeding. On the surface, another walrus is getting ready to dive. They rest and breathe for about 1 minute before each 5-minute dive. The nutritional spectrum is very abundant. Mussels, snails, sea cucumbers, small crabs, octopus, and even ground-dwelling flatfish are welcome. A walrus has to eat between 3,000 and 6,000 mussels each day in order to maintain its weight. The stiff and highly sensitive whiskers help the walrus to locate food on the ocean floor, and if necessary they use their tusks to dig out prey and then blow on it to free it from the sand, all to reduce their dive time. The Swedish walrus researcher Erik Born was able to prove with the help of telemetry that walruses feed continuously for days at a time, as if in a trance. He was able to disprove all other previous claims. The record for this non-stop feeding frenzy is 79 hours. Only interrupted by the vital breaks in order to breathe. To shoot this footage, our cameraman puts himself in grave danger. What looks so harmless here can turn life-threatening within seconds, and is just as dangerous as diving with a great white shark outside a cage. Walruses do not like to be disturbed while feeding, and once they attack, they're very fast. 30 kilometers an hour, a speed that seems hardly possible for such a large animal. This is what a mussel bank looks like that has been fed on by walruses, a swathe of destruction. Unfortunately, we can't see how they open the mussels, but we know that they have 18 very strong teeth to crack them with. Once the mussel is open, they suck out the flesh, all at exceptional speed. These two are feeding in an almost vertical position. Walruses are not trying to protect their bellies by doing this, but to bring their tusks in a horizontal position to make full use of their whiskers. A harp seal in grave danger. A polar bear has spotted the seal, and the hunt is on. The polar bear has nothing to set against the diving skills of the seal, but it's hungry and it continues to follow the hunt. Two walruses have been watching the scene. They're faster than the bear, catch the seal that's trying to escape and kill it together. Walruses don't just eat mussels. Scientists have even found small family members in the stomachs of some bulls. This is the dark side of the endearing walrus. Not a single polar bear would dare to steal prey from a walrus or even disturb them during their rest times. Walruses also seem to be a bit mischievous. Too bad. Professor Averinchev has been watching the bear but was not prepared for a confrontation. The bear leaves no doubt as to who is boss here. This last difficult stage to find the last refuges of the walrus has come to an end. It was torture at times, outside temperatures of -20 degrees centigrade and freezing cold water. But the animals did offer us a little insight into their private lives, and that made it all worthwhile. Few creatures are part of such a well-functioning social structure, which in turn will also assure the preservation of the walrus species, unless mankind continues to intervene. Walrus research seems easy when the animals allow us to observe them on land, but it's much more difficult when researchers want to follow them into the ocean, where they spend half their lifetimes. So it comes as no surprise that with the help of telemetry, we have only recently been able to find out more about the private lives of these magnificent animals.